Episode 19, titled Assemble Required SSP Attachments, we focus on compiling the exhibits that complete your security story and make the System Security Plan, SSP, after first use testable rather than merely readable. A strong core narrative still needs attachments that show what you run, how you run it, and where proof will appear when a reviewer asks. Think of this episode as building the binder's backbone. Each attachment answers a specific verification question so an assessor can sample without improvisation. We will walk through inventories, behavior commitments, privacy analyses, summary tables, interconnection records, operational plans, and an evidence index that ties everything together. The goal is pragmatic completeness. When these attachments are current, labeled, and cross-referenced from the SSP, assessment becomes confirmation and continuous monitoring feels like an orderly extension of your daily work.
Begin with the asset inventory, because everything else depends on knowing what exists and who owns it. The inventory should enumerate hardware footprints where applicable, virtual assets such as virtual machines and containers, cloud resources including databases, message queues, and object stores, and the management services that control them. Each line needs an identifier, an environment designation, an owner by role, and lifecycle status so decommissioned items do not linger. Tie entries to tagging in your cloud accounts and to configuration repositories, so an assessor can trace from the list to the source of truth. Practical fields matter more than elaborate schemas. Name, purpose, criticality, backup coverage, patch grouping, and whether the item sits inside or outside the authorization boundary. When the inventory reflects the living system, diagrams reconcile easily, sampling is predictable, and surprises are rare.
A software inventory complements the asset list by describing what code and components run on those assets. It should record versions, publishers or sources, cryptographic verification status, licensing terms where relevant, and deployment footprint across environments. Include operating systems, base images, third-party libraries with notable security posture, and commercial off-the-shelf products embedded in the service. Reference the pipeline or package registry that assures immutability and provenance, and note which items are scanned continuously for vulnerabilities. The useful signal is traceability. A reviewer should be able to read a software entry, follow a link to the artifact or image manifest, and see where it is deployed today. Version dates and commit identifiers make the list auditable. Without this attachment, patch claims are impossible to verify, and dependency risk blurs into guesswork. Attach the rules of behavior to codify user commitments and acceptable use acknowledgments across roles. The Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, FedRAMP, after first use, expects clarity about how administrators, analysts, support staff, and end users must behave in systems that handle federal information. The attachment should present the plain obligations users accept: safeguarding credentials, honoring session controls, prohibiting unapproved software, and reporting suspected incidents promptly. Show where and how acceptance is captured: first login prompts, annual reattestation, or onboarding packets, and how revocations are handled on role change or departure. Keep language concise and human. This document is not for lawyers alone. It is a practical guardrail that turns policy into personal accountability. When acknowledgments are dated and retrievable, reviewers see a control that actually touches behavior rather than one that lives only in policy. Add the privacy threshold analysis to determine whether further privacy assessment is required, then route accordingly. The PTA explains what personal data elements exist, why they are collected, and whether statutory or policy triggers apply. It should speak in simple terms to the presence or absence of sensitive, personally identifiable information, as well as to the system's purpose, data sharing, and retention posture. When the PTA indicates that risk warrants deeper analysis, it becomes the fork that leads to a full privacy impact assessment. Record who conducted the threshold analysis, the date, the sources consulted, and the criteria used, so the decision stands on more than habit. Reviewers appreciate a tight, well-argued PTA because it shows that privacy is integrated into design rather than treated as a late gate. When required, include the privacy impact assessment to document processing risks and the mitigations you apply. The PIA should outline data flows from collection to disposal, identify potential harms to individuals, and show safeguards such as minimization, masking, encryption, access limitation, and transparent notice. It should describe sharing with partners, consent models where applicable, and user mechanisms for correction or redress. Align the assessment to your system security plan by referencing the same diagrams and inventories, so the two documents reinforce each other rather than diverge. The best PIA reads like a narrative of care, specific risks acknowledged in plain language and specific controls tied to evidence. With that alignment, the privacy story strengthens the overall authorization case rather than standing apart from it.
Provide a control summary table to give reviewers a snapshot of status, inheritance, and testing results across control families. This attachment condenses a long story into a single plane of truth: implemented controls, inherited portions from providers, any planned improvements with target dates, and the latest assessment results at a glance. Use consistent terms that match your SSP pros and forces, detects, alerts, recovers, and align color or status labels to unambiguous definitions. This table is not a substitute for the detailed narrative, but it is the dashboard assessors will open first to orient their sampling strategy. When it reflects current reality, it saves hours. When it lags, it creates churn because narrative and summary disagree. Treat the table as a living index that you update whenever findings close or inheritance shifts.
Include interconnection agreements to document purpose, protections, contact points, and authorization references for every connection beyond your boundary. Each agreement should state why the connection exists, what data types traverse it, how authentication and encryption are enforced, who responds to incidents, and how changes are communicated. Reference the partner's authorization to operate, ATO, after first use, or equivalent attestation with dates that cover your reliance window. Add points of contact with escalation paths and service windows, and summarize monitoring responsibilities on both sides. When these agreements are attached and cross-referenced, you replace tribal knowledge with durable commitment. That change shows up instantly in assessment: fewer follow-ups, fewer speculative questions, and faster acceptance of edges that once felt risky. Attach your configuration management plan to capture change control and baseline practices as a concrete addendum. The plan should show how you define baselines for systems and software, how changes are proposed, reviewed, tested, approved, and deployed, and how rollback works when a change misbehaves. Connect the plan to your pipeline steps, ticketing queues, approval roles, and segregation between development, staging, and production. Record emergency change procedures with time boxing and after-action documentation so break glass does not become the norm. The value of this attachment is operational clarity. It proves that your environment evolves under governance rather than improvisation, which reduces both risk and reviewer anxiety. Add the incident response plan as an attachment that translates roles, steps, and notification timelines into an executable playbook. Define classification levels for events, triage criteria, evidence preservation practices, internal and external communication channels, and the time windows for notifying sponsors or authorities. Tie the plan to your paging and collaboration tools, name the incident commander role, and provide templates for initial and final reports. Include lessons learned expectations and the path by which corrective actions enter your backlog and POA&M, plan of action and milestones, after first use. When an assessor sees a plan with real names, contact methods, and rehearsal cadence, the what-if conversation becomes calm and grounded. Attach the contingency plan to show backup coverage, recovery objectives, and test summaries in one place. State recovery time objectives and recovery point objectives with numbers you actually meet. Name backup scopes and encryption posture, and describe restoration procedures with the conditions that trigger them. Include summaries of the most recent exercises, tabletop or live failover, highlighting outcomes, gaps found, and fixes adopted with dates. Reference the environments and regions included in tests so confidence maps to the topology you run today. A credible contingency plan reads like a travel kit. Everything you need is present, labeled, and recently used, not a set of emergency tools that no one knows how to operate. Create an evidence index to guide assessors directly to artifacts and data extracts without rummaging. The index should map each significant claim in the SSP to one or more evidence locations. dashboards, saved queries, configuration exports, commit hashes, tickets, reports, and logs. Provide access instructions, sample date ranges, and the owner responsible for refreshing each item. Keep the index concise and searchable. This attachment pays off the moment a reviewer asks to see one example of X last month, because the path is predetermined. It also disciplines your own teams to keep artifacts current and retrievable, which makes continuous monitoring less burdensome.
Call out a specific pitfall so you can avoid unnecessary churn. Mismatched file names, versions, or owners across attachments and references. When the SSP points to irplan-final.pdf, but the repository holds irplan-v3-final.pdf, confidence erodes before content is read. Solve this with a simple naming and versioning convention, visible owners for each attachment, and a short release note that lists what changed. Date every file, embed a version string on page 1, and update cross-references when you publish. Small editorial discipline prevents long email threads later, and it signals that the rest of your program respects details.
We finish by turning completeness into motion. With attachments compiled, the security story is now both readable and verifiable. Inventories show what exists, behavior rules bind users to care, privacy analyses explain duty of care, summary tables orient reviewers. Interconnections are governed. Operational plans reveal readiness, contingency proves resilience, and the evidence index makes proof easy to reach. Your next action is to run a completeness check using a brief checklist. Each attachment dated, owner named, link valid from the SSP, and at least one sample artifact confirmed open. Schedule a quarterly sweep to refresh versions and confirm references still resolve. When these attachments stay alive, authorization stays current, and your team spends more time improving controls than hunting for files. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.